It just hasn't been a good year for Syracuse basketball at all.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, we're joined by Neil Adler from Inside the Loud House for a two-part episode, all right? We're going to talk about Syracuse basketball's loss to Pitt, 80-69, blowing a 16-point lead. We're also going to discuss Elijah Moore being out, his future outlook with the team, the future of Syracuse basketball in general, and of course, ACC tournament discussion. Thank you so much, Neil, for hopping on the podcast. We're in need of some therapy, all right? So hopefully this conversation could be some therapy for ourselves and also for the entire Syracuse basketball fan base. Let's just cut to the chase. I mean, what are your thoughts on Syracuse basketball blowing a 16-point lead and still losing by double digits to Pitt?
Well, Jackson, thanks for having me on as always, brother. Well, you know, it's like two schools of thought. One is Syracuse in a lot of games this season has gotten off to slow starts and fallen behind early. So the fact that Syracuse on the road against a longtime rival got out to it was 9-0, it was 22-6, et cetera, that was encouraging. So we're happy about that, right? But then they still end up losing by 11. So was it like worse to have the lead and then not have the lead versus never having in the first? I would still be of the mindset that it was encouraging to see them get off to a strong start. But it's basketball in general, college or at other levels, is a game of runs. And so what happened is Syracuse was shooting lights out from three, something that they don't do a lot of this year. And Chris Bell was fabulous. And they're up 16 points and in the first half, and it was 7 at halftime. And in the second half, they kept shooting threes, didn't make as many of them, still shot a good percentage for the game, but they, were taking threes. They were, I think Pittsburgh wanted them to keep shooting threes because they figured that the law of averages would even out. And Syracuse did not shoot well from the from the interior. I think on 2-point attempts, I think they shot like 9 of 27 or something like that. So not good. Pitt started making threes. Syracuse had a big edge in rebounding in the first half and even into the second half. And then Pitt evened that out. I think it was ended up tied at the end of the game. So Pitt, did better on the glass, was shooting threes better. They crushed Syracuse in terms of paint points and was, I believe, +9 from the free throw line. So yeah, and the other thing was, and this has been really frustrating all season long, is the turnovers. Syracuse had 14 turnovers for the game. Pitt only led, I think, 17-11 in points off turnovers. So it wasn't like a huge edge in turning those miscues into points. But it's still, every time, now I'm saying the Captain Obvious here, but every time Syracuse is turning the ball over, that's a missed opportunity at getting a shot up or scoring or whatever, however you want to characterize it. It's just, it was just sloppy. And so the end result is an 11-point loss and the fan base feeling further deflated. But I thought there was encouraging signs in terms of Bell, is continuing to shoot better from three, the team shooting better from three. Again, they did hold their own on the glass, but just, it's and the effort level was there. It just Pitt's a better team, and they're playing at home. The Zoo is a frenetic environment, and they're fighting for their NCAA tournament life. Do they have more to play for, so to speak? Sure, I guess you could say it that way, but they're just a better team, and the better team won. And this has been Syracuse's MO all season. Obviously there's been a handful of games where they've gotten blown out, Tennessee, Maryland, a few others, but otherwise they're in a lot of these games. They just can't get over the hump. They really, it's been frustrating for sure.
It's beyond frustrating. And
frustrating.
Is this a blowout? Because I think it is. I mean,
Yeah.
You led 22, not you. Syracuse
I know what you meant.
led 22-6 in this game at about
Right.
the 10-minute mark of the first half.
Right.
It got so bad for Pitt where their fans were booing their team off the floor.
I know.
I'm not exact. I heard it on the broadcast. I'm like,
oh yeah, there were some boos.
They're booing them because
Yep.
Pitt is a team that's there. I don't think they're going to get in the NCAA tournament, but they are fighting to get in. They are on that. They're kind of on the bubble.
Sure,
right?
They're going to have to. They're going to. I mean, they're going to have to pile up some wins, but they're not. They're in it.
They're not that far off,
right?
And if you lose at home to Syracuse, which would be a quad 3 loss at this point of the game, which we know recency bias is a very real thing, by the way.
Oh yeah,
they're dead. They're completely dead. And from that point on, they blew Syracuse out.
Yeah.
They blew the Orange out. Now, I wanted to get to one thing that you mentioned, which is Syracuse basketball and shooting the three. They are not a good three-point shooting team. I think we are all aware of that. But there is one player that I really have an issue with right now as far as shooting three-pointers. Can you take a guess as to who that player is?
Ooh, and is it because this player is not shooting well from three?
It's a bad combination. This player shoots a lot of threes per game and doesn't make a lot of threes.
Oh, then you're probably talking about JJ Starling.
Bingo. So JJ Starling, first of all, in this game against Pitt, he goes 3 of 11 from downtown. That's not a good percentage at all. And by the way, like, I understand that JJ Starling is the best player and it's hard to criticize the best player.
Sure.
But this is fair, in my opinion. JJ Starling this season is shooting 5.8 3-pointers a game. 5.8. That's a pretty big number. 5.8 a game.
Number. I didn't realize
he's making them at about a 28% clip.
Yeah.
I mean, Neil, is there someone in his ear that can just tell him to stop shooting threes?
And I got their latest stats up here, and 28.4. But that's an interesting point. I didn't the volume. And I agree with you. He's their best player. He's their go-to player in crunch time. He can create for himself. Kind of like with Judah Mintz last year, maybe forces it sometimes, but like is good at getting into the paint and that sort of thing. And he can hit a three. But yes, I agree with you that his strengths are more in getting to the rim, getting to the free throw line. If he has a step in 3-pointer here and there, there was one point yesterday where he did, like, I feel like did he make 2 in a row back to back or like near each other? And like that kind of like helped with the lead. But yes, kind of seemed like he was settling sometimes. Some of them I feel like were shots that you could get at any time. Not any time. You know what I'm saying? Like, they weren't like, it was like this amazing, offensive set. So 28% is not good. Chris Bell's been shooting great from three. Peter made one yesterday. Lucas Taylor has shown he can hit. Kyle Cuff's definitely been struggling from deep, although he doesn't take a ton of shots. But it would be nice if Starling's, I don't think he needs to take 6 threes a game. That's not his game. That's just my opinion, but
not at all. And for context here, Judah Mintz, I'm looking at his numbers right now, and Judah Mintz was not a good 3-point shooter either. In fact, he was at 28.2% last year. So there's a very small difference between Judah Mintz and JJ Starling in shooting the 3-pointer season to season. He only shot 2.7 3-pointers a game last year. That's it. And we thought that was too much. I understand. We obviously want JJ with the ball in his hands, but he's so much better when he's going to the rim or at least settling for a mid-range shot.
Agreed.
Someone has got to get in his ear saying, JJ, you're not Steph Curry. Okay? You're not going to take 11 threes. You should not be taking 11 threes in a game. Look, I'm fine with him taking a couple of them.
Sure.
And if he has it going, maybe you take another one.
Sure.
And, you have that heat check moment because he is a star player. He can get hot.
Absolutely.
I just don't understand why he's taking so many threes. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. Now Taxes is easily uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy, while they work on your taxes. You get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed, all while you go about your day. No stressing, no worrying, no waiting. Now this is taxes into a TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. We are joined by Neil Adler from inside the Loud House. Syracuse basketball blows a 16-point lead, and yet they still lose by double digits to the Pitt Panthers. Now, there have been a couple of injuries this season. J.J. Starling was hurt in the beginning of the year. Donnie Freeman, the five-star freshman, best recruit since Mello, hasn't played since the Florida State game. And guess what? He's not going to play again this season. Hopefully he returns next year, although that is iffy at best. But last night, about an hour before tip-off, we got more injury news, and it's not exactly ideal. Elijah Choppa Moore did not play last night with a right leg injury per Syracuse basketball's Twitter account. Now, we already saw one game without Choppa Moore, but Neil, how do you think this impacts Syracuse, at least for this season?
Well, certainly it's not ideal, although to be fair, it's not like Elijah, and I'm a big fan of Elijah. I think he's a hardworking young man, and I obviously want him to have a speedy recovery, but let's be honest, in recent games, even when he's in the starting lineup, he doesn't seem to play a whole lot. And that's certainly been something that other fans have, discussed with me on social media or has been talked about in chat forums and that sort of thing. It's like, why is Choppa starting, but then getting taken out so quickly and not play? Like, what's the point of that? I mean, Syracuse in their post on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, they didn't say anything other than he was out for that game. So we don't know if it's day to day or, if I'm being honest, I don't think that Syracuse was super forthcoming with information about Donnie, maybe because they weren't sure, or, there's certainly privacy laws and I get all that. But I hope Choppa comes back. I mean, if he doesn't, he's not having a huge impact on the game of late, but it's also because he's not playing a lot. So it's like, it's not really fit. I'm not like, criticizing him per se. I'm just saying you can't really have an impact if you're not playing. Carlos actually had a pretty good game yesterday. He had 8 points and six assists. And certainly if Elijah is out indefinitely or longer term, a guy like Carlos is going to get more run, and Carlos was the starter and then struggled, and then Elijah became the starter. But I'm looking here at Elijah's numbers. I mean, he's averaging just under 16 minutes a game, 5 points, a rebound, an assist, shooting less than 40% from the field and 31% from the 3-point land. And he certainly had some games earlier on. I can't remember which game where he had like 20 plus points in one game early on and he just totally erupted. And but he's kind of like everyone else on the team. They're just really inconsistent. He came in known as a long range shooter, and he was a top 60 national prospect, a top 10 shooting guard in his class. But I think the expectation that he was going to have a huge impact as a freshman, I'm not so sure about that. But then again, when someone like Carlos, who was in the starting rotation, struggles, and then JJ was out for 7 games. So Elijah, gets into the starting rotation, but still isn't playing a ton, isn't necessarily in there at crunch time. So I want to see him back just because I want the young man to be healthy. But I mean, this probably sounds crass, but if he doesn't come back, I mean, I don't know if the team is like, it's better to have Elijah there than not, but is it like a huge drop off? I don't know. I mean, what do you think?
I do not think it is a big drop off.
Yeah, and that's not anything against him personally. I mean, it's. Yeah,
I totally get it because I'm with you. I think even if he did play in this game, I don't think it makes much of a difference at all. Like, he's averaging 5 points a game this season. He shoots not even 32% from 3-pointer he's a true freshman, so he could get better, of course, but it's not like he's been setting the world on fire. He's had a couple of moments, especially in the beginning of the season, and that's been about it. But I do think that he has been mismanaged this season.
I think that's a fair assessment
because make up your mind.
Play him or don't play him. Don't start him and then give him a quick hook.
He starts and then plays
10
minutes, give or take.
Right.
And then he just doesn't play the rest of the way.
So
like,
what's the strategy there, especially with like a freshman, like who you recruited long-term recruit. I mean, he was initially a Boeheim recruit, but obviously stuck with the program when Ocha because he's, close with the other coaches. But it's like Carlos struggles, JJ was out, you insert Elijah into the starting rotation, but then he gets quick hooks, and maybe some of them are justified, maybe some, but it's like, what does that do for a freshman's confidence level? It's like, I'd rather just see him come off the bench and pay 10 to 15 minutes a game, but not, and I don't make a lot about who's starting versus who isn't. For me, it's who's playing in crunch time. But especially with a young player, you like start him, and then even if he's not, whether he's playing well or not, it's like he's always coming out. I just don't understand it. I don't understand it.
Yeah. I think we're on the same page here.
Yeah.
I don't see the benefit in starting him for a few minutes and then just not playing him the rest of the way.
Right.
I watch it and I'm like, well, why are you even playing him to begin with if this is what your plan is? You might as well just redshirt the guy, which of course you can't do anymore. He's played too many games. But if your plan going in was, well, you know what? Like, we're just going to play him like 5-10 minutes a night, even if he's starting the game, which he is when he's healthy, we're going just redshirt the guy then. Well, what's the point? I think he has been mismanaged, even if he's not having the best year when he's been on the floor. What do you think his future is going to be? Because according to Donna Titota from Syracuse.com, she was the one who had the information that he was wearing a boot on his right foot. I don't want to speculate, but we don't know when he is going to come back. So, if he comes back next game, which is in a week against NC State, great. But again, what do you think the future is with Elijah Moore?
Yeah, and I did see that from Donna, and I think they mentioned it on the ACC Network broadcast as well, if I'm not mistaken, last night. I mean, if he's in a boot, again, I'm no doctor. They do have, they're not playing again until, what is it, a week from today, a week from Wednesday against NC State. I don't know what to make of anything anymore with this team. I'm not trying to be doom and gloom, and I'd hope that he would come back, but they call it a right leg injury. Is that what they characterize it as? Right leg.
They said on Twitter it was a right leg injury.
Yeah,
and then you have other people, the reporters saying it's a foot injury. I don't know. It's something on the right side of his lower body.
I mean,
probably below the knee.
And I feel like when they first came out with this stuff about Donnie, they called it a lower left leg, and like they used lower in there.
Yes, they said lower. Was it the left side or the right side?
Oh, okay, maybe I'm mistaken then. I just remember the word.
It was the lower left or right leg injury.
It was just, and I remember the word lower was in there.
Foot procedure. Now look, I am not a doctor. You're not a doctor, but there's a big difference between the leg and a foot. I'm just going to put that out there.
Yeah, well, maybe you should become a doctor then, because you're super on point there.
I know the difference between a leg and a foot. I hope that the audience knows too.
I hope so. I don't have any more information than that, so like it's pure speculation. But I will say that with the way the season's going, 4 regular season games left, it would not surprise me if he doesn't play again this year. But I'm not wishing that. I'm not hoping that. It's just like my gut opinion based on this season and where it's gone. But again, like you said, they've got a week off, so maybe. But being in a boot, I mean, that's a precautionary thing, but does that say it's more serious than we would? I don't know. But I just, based on the way the season has gone, I hope he plays again, but it wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't. I guess I'll just leave it at that.
I'm with you on that. And as far as the whole boot thing, you can't really get a read on it.
No,
it's obviously not necessarily, I wouldn't say it's a good sign, but I wouldn't also say it's doom and gloom, because you see this a lot, at least in football, where at the end of games, you'll see players in the next week or so before another game, they're wearing a boot. And you're like, well, are they going to play? And sometimes it's just precaution. They don't want them moving whatever is wrong there. So you put the boot on just so that they are ready to go for the next game. But It's speculation. I don't.
Yeah.
This season has been so bad that there is almost no real incentive to push him if he's not 100%. If Elijah Moore is 100%, he's going to play. But if he's 90%, is it worth it? Because if he can get hurt worse, and we'll talk later on, or actually we'll talk about it soon, about his future really beyond just this season. You don't want him to get hurt even more than he already is.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Yeah. No, I agree with you. If he's not 100%, what's the point?
We're joined by Neil Adler from inside the Loud House. We're having some therapy here. Hopefully it's also therapy for you all. Syracuse basketball losing to Pitt 80-69. All these podcasts about basketball have pretty much turned into therapy sessions. It's been literal. I keep saying it. It's been the worst year for Syracuse basketball since before man landed on the moon. That's how bad this year has done. That's how bad. I'm running out of words to say about this season. But we're talking about Elijah Moore right now. Obviously, he did not play against Pitt with what Syracuse basketball is calling a right leg injury. There is no timetable with him. Neil, I mean, what do you think his future is long-term? I mean, do you think he's going to come back to Syracuse next season, or do you see him maybe entering the transfer portal?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly been something that's been talked about, hot button topic, I'd say, on our social media pages over in recent weeks, irrespective of the fact that he didn't, play last night. Looking ahead to next season, and certainly there are some fans out there just voicing their opinions. I assume they don't have inside information, but just prognosticating that they don't think that Elijah Moore or Donnie Freeman, two of their three, would be back in a Syracuse uniform next season. And it's my whole thing is with the transfer portal and just kind of where we are with collegiate athletics, and we're obviously just talking about college basketball here. I mean, who the heck knows? I did frankly write a column, I guess it was last week, where I said that if Donnie Freeman, and I know you're asking about Elijah, but if Donnie Freeman decides to come back to college for a sophomore season versus pursuing a professional career, I actually think he will be back at Syracuse. And that's just my opinion. It's not like Donnie told me that or someone else close to him told me that. I just, based on his relationships with Syracuse coaches, I think he would be back. Comparing like the mass exodus last year was, this situation this year, as I pointed out, a lot of those guys, the sophomores that left, those were Jim Boeheim recruits, his last recruiting class. Now, I'm not saying Autry didn't play a role in getting those guys aboard, but so it's not quite the same comparison. But for Elijah, it's I hope he would be back. I hope he doesn't hit the portal. He loves, by all accounts, when he got offered by Syracuse years ago and was being recruited by and eventually, signed a verbal commitment, or did a verbal commitment and signed. I mean, he loves Syracuse. But again, just what we were touching on, the fact that he's like been, was thrust into the starting rotation, but then getting quick hooks. Is he frustrated? I personally don't know. I'd still like to think that he would want to, and he's obviously not going pro, but so his two options would be stay at Syracuse or transfer, and neither will surprise me. I'd like to think that he will come back for a sophomore season at Syracuse. Part of it is you've got another shooting guard coming in and Kyan Anthony. How does that impact his decision potentially? Who else is going to be returning out of existing players, if any? Who are they going to get in the port? I mean, it's a lot to, unpack and a lot of unknowns at this point. But I still kind of, if I had to guess, I think that both, if we're talking about the freshmen, if we're talking about, put Peter to the side, but if we're talking about Donnie and Elijah, I'd like to think they're both back, assuming for Donnie, doesn't want to go pro, but I'm hopeful that Elijah will be back, but it wouldn't surprise me if he hits the portal. I mean, it's just, it's been a weird season. It's been a frustrating season for the team, and I could certainly understand if he's frustrated, given that, like you said, I think he's been mismanaged, so to speak. And so we'll see. What do you think?
So I think it's 50-50 in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's speculation again. I don't really have sourcing on this, but
Sure.
When I look at Elijah Moore, I think of two factors. I know he loves Syracuse and everything like that, but here's what it really comes down to. Number one, what's his performance been this season?
Right.
This season, we're not talking about what he can potentially be going forward. Just this season.
Sure.
He hasn't been good. He has just not been good. He's averaging 5 points. He's shooting less than 40% from the field, 31.5% from the three-point line. And he is being mismanaged on top of that, which certainly does not help. But he has not been very good. Number two, think about the position that Elijah Moore plays. He plays the 2 guard, right? If JJ Starling returns, combined with Kyan Anthony coming next season, not coming back, coming into the program next season, he's the third 2 guard on the team. So how does that factor into everything? If he was playing better this season, then I would say he's basically a lock to come back, because it doesn't matter if JJ Starling and Kyan Anthony are coming in or coming back, whatever it is. He was playing so well as a true freshman, he's going to have a role no matter what.
Agreed.
But because he hasn't really been that great this year, now all of a sudden I'm like, I don't. It's 50-50. It's a coin flip to me. But you know what? That's just this day and age in college basketball. You just you don't know. You don't know. Anyway, that is it for part 1 of this podcast. We talked about Syracuse basketball. We talked more about their loss against Pitt, unfortunately, just another bad game. We talked a lot about Elijah Moore, his injury for this season, and we just ended the conversation talking about his future potentially with the program, whether or not we think he is going to hit the portal or stay with the program for another year. I'm Jackson Holzer. That's Neil Adler from Inside the Loud House. And folks, don't worry, because we're going to be back very soon with another episode of Locked On Syracuse. So take care, everyone. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. For your second listen, you can check out the Locked On College Basketball Podcast with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. Don't wait for March. Be the most informed college basketball fan right now. Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.